Hi, my name is Beth Shook. I have a piece included in the 23rd San Angelo National Ceramic Competition. And I'd like to use some time here to introduce myself and tell you a little bit about my process. I grew up in El Paso, Texas. I went to the University of Texas at El Paso and got my BFA there. And then I conferred my MFA degree in ceramics at Arizona State University. I sort of found my way into ceramics by default. I was originally a painting and drawing major and needed a 3D medium to minor in. I wasn't really interested in metals and jewelry work. I was very interested in foundry work. That fascinated me, but I was totally intimidated by it. And so I plopped myself down in a ceramics class. I had never worked with clay before. I had no idea what I was in for. But eventually won over and then some and changed my major to ceramics at that point. My work is largely autobiographical in that I use narrative images to recount my relationship with people and things through my faith in Jesus Christ. Honestly, I don't know another story well enough to tell it. I'm a storyteller. And because my work is narrative, the images are generally representational for the most part. I want to use the familiar, I want to use the recognizable to invite the viewer to my story, and we can share that. For my drawn tiles, I use a Cone 10 sculpture clay. It's white. This is very rough sculpture clay for these tiles. This is just a small tile. On the top of that rough surface, because I'm going to draw on it, I use a heavy layer of porcelain slip that doesn't quite fit. I make it fit the surface. But before I get onto the clay, I take a photograph of the idea that I'm working with. Well, the one that's been tumbling around in my head, because it takes a little while. So I'll create a photograph of what I want the image to be. And then I take that photograph and I enlarge it to a drawing. So the drawing is created the same size that the wet clay will be. So I'm going to use the drawing as my scale. And these drawings are very detailed studies. So this is the study for the piece that's included in the show. It's very detailed. There's a lot of people in 3D that don't draw, and I get it, I'm a drawer. They don't understand this part of the process. But here's my thinking. First of all, it helps me practice seeing. But more importantly, it helps me learn the image. I have to learn the form. I have to learn the space. Because I'm going to translate this drawing onto clay, and there's no room for error. There's no errant marks. I don't get to erase. And so this detailed study primes me for getting things done the first time. So it's sort of my research beforehand. So detailed study, the size that will be on the wet clay. So once this is done, then I'm ready to translate that drawing onto the clay. However, not before I create my notes. So this is my sketchbook, and it's got glazed notes. This is, again, the piece that was included in the show, and these are my glazed notes. So this is essentially my order of operation to develop the surface, because I like to work in layers and create some depth. And I need to have sort of a process operation. What comes first? What goes second? What do I need to protect in order to let something else happen? I use glazes and washes, colored washes. A lot of the times I create pencils and pastels of the colors that I need to continue the drawing process. But this all has to happen before I can walk into the glaze area and work. So once the clay is bone dry, or nearly bone dry, I use a printmaker's dry point tool, and I incise the lines, the heavy sculpture, the structural lines that I would need on the drawing. Those are incised into the surface before it's bisqued. So I have an area. I know where I'm going with this drawing. Once the tile's dry, it's bisque fired. Occasionally I will add some underpainting in the form of an underglaze before I bisque fire, but not very often. I just don't, I don't necessarily care for how I have to deal with those with my glaze surface. Once it's bisque fired and it comes out, this big bisque tile, I'll cover the entire surface with another slip, a black slip, like a printmaker would when they're inking a plate. And just like that printmaker, I take my sponger and I pull back the black slip to develop and reveal the image that I need. So this little tile, this guy, he's got a little grouchy little bird on him. And so essentially, this was all at one point covered in black, and then I pulled it all back to reveal the blue on here is a wash. Again, all the notes were down before this all happened to develop a surface. And that's, you know, how I work. It's all about layers and creating layers and having a detailed process to work through. And part of that comes from that drawing nature of mine that I never let go of. And I love to draw. So I hope this has been fun. Enjoy the show virtually, and perhaps soon we can you'd be able to enjoy it in person. Thank you so much.